Hello friends, so today's video is going to be my March TBR. Just like with my February TBR, I'm going to break this video up into sections, so each grouping of books kind of has its own theme. There will be timestamps below for each of these different groupings, but before we jump into that, just a little announcement, I guess you could say, or a little heads up. For the month of March, at one point I am going out of town. I'm going to see the redwoods and I'm very excited to look at some giant trees. I want to still have videos go up, but I'm going to have fewer videos go up for a 2-week stretch. So before my trip, I will have that week be 2 videos, and then the week of my trip, I will have 2 videos also. Jumping into the books now though, I'm going to start with some new releases that I'm hoping to get around to. I feel like I made my anticipated releases videos a long time ago, and we're already coming up on March. The first one would be All the Horses of Iceland. So if I'm understanding correctly, the story is taking the horses of Iceland, which are their own kind of horse. That sounds really uneducated, but the horses in Iceland, they are different from horses everywhere else in the world. And this story is kind of creating a mythology around these horses, which I think sounds absolutely fascinating. The horses in Iceland were one of my favorite things about Iceland when I went. They're so cute, and they're also majestic at the same time. There's just something about them. There's just something about Iceland. I'm always talking about Iceland. Next up, and a book I know basically everybody had on their anticipated releases, would be Gallant by V.E. Schwab. This one is young adult. There was some confusion as to whether it was adult or young adult, because for the longest time V.E. Schwab was advised to use her initials when writing adult, and then her full name Victoria when writing young adult. And she has since, she had a post about it, said that she's just going to publish everything as V.E. Schwab. She doesn't want to have to split herself into these 2 identities, if you will, for the age ranges that she writes in. So typically, you would see a young adult book by her with Victoria. However, because she's made this change, that is why it's V.E. Schwab. All of that to say, I think that this book sounds like classic V.E. Schwab. It seems like it's going to take something somewhat familiar and then be a little bit twisted, have her signature slightly morbid flair. It's a style of hers that I've come to really, really enjoy in her storytelling. And I have read both her young adult works and adult. I end up enjoying both, and I think that she doesn't shy away from some of those darker tones in her young adult. Either way, very, very excited about this one. The next few would be some adult fantasy. We have The Bone Orchard, and I'm going to hopefully be buddy reading this one with Jess Owens. If we can set it up, I'd like to do a patron live show for this one, and then that way we can chat about it. We will likely chat about it in April, because the release of this book is a little bit later, and I want to make sure that people have had time to pick it up. But her and I will be buddy reading that one this month. We also have City of Dusk. So this particular author, I read one of their young adult books. I believe it was their debut, and it was a Count of Monte Cristo retelling. And I enjoyed aspects of that story quite a bit. I do think that it's one of those where if you've read The Count of Monte Cristo, you'll probably have more of an appreciation for everything that the author did include, or the little ways in which they tweaked the story. However, I didn't have that, and so in a sense, it almost felt like I could have had more to the story. But regardless, I did really, really enjoy certain aspects of that book, specifically the way in which they explored trauma, or the way in which the author had certain characters dealing with addiction. There's one character too who, obviously, Count of Monte Cristo is a revenge story, and even though it almost feels cliche at this point, the whole, is this really worth it? What is it doing to me? This is taking over my life. The way that that's explored, I know it gets explored in a lot of revenge stories, but the way that this author did it, I really liked. So I'm excited to pick something else up by them, and I'm especially excited to pick up an adult work by them. We also have Wild and Wicked Things. I was actually given an ARC of this one by Orbit, so thank you so much to Orbit for sending me an ARC. And I've been wanting to jump into it, but again, I like waiting a little bit closer to the release date, so that way when I end up discussing the book, it's at a time that all of you have access to it as well. I can't wait. It sort of seems like a Great Gatsby sort of feel, but I think it's going to have that glamour, but with something dark underneath sort of a situation going on. So really excited about this one too. And then last, because there's so many new releases coming out, we have A Magic Steeped in Poison. I mentioned that this was 100% catching my eye because of the cover. Oh my gosh, is this not the most beautiful cover? In the last few years, I definitely think publishing is making some interesting choices, and they're trying new things when it comes to how they release books in a series. And with this particular story, it would seem the author had the duology completed, and thus they are going to release these books rather close together, both the first and the second. You can see the cover for both the first and the second, and it sounds really cool. I am hoping, if I end up loving this first one, that I can just jump right into the second. I really like the idea that we as readers, when we pick up a newer book and it's the first in a series, we don't have to wait that long. Now, my hesitation in being really excited about this concept is that I don't want publishing to then start really pushing authors to get books out faster. I think sometimes there's already some intense deadlines put on authors, and they end up having to get releases out the very next year, which means they have to have the book done far before their release date because there's so much that goes into the editing, the marketing. So I'm excited at the concept as a reader, and then also if the author already has the work completed, then I'm all for it. Now moving out of all of those new releases and into some that are not brand new, I did a video recently of some backlist books that I'm wanting to pick up. So the idea is that there are certain authors whose works I've enjoyed, and I want to go back and read some of their older works. And I don't know about all of you. I really like structure. I really like TBRs. I really like making lists and to-do lists. And I like having an idea of what to pick up, but I'm also a mood reader. And then I end up making a TBR and being like, oh, I want to read this other thing now. So what I've decided I'm going to do for this portion of my TBR is I'm going to mention a lot of different books, and my goal is to get around to some of them. So kind of a lot of the books I mentioned in my backlist TBR video are gonna be mentioned. First up, we have Codex Alera by Jim Butcher. I have put this on so many TBRs and not picked it up. This one is probably highest priority for the backlist books. And I have always liked Jim Butcher's writing, and I think his stories are really fun. I just haven't 100% fallen in love head over heels just yet. And I'm hoping that Codex Alera is going to be the one that is for me. I'm going to go through kind of quickly some of the other ones. We have Temeraire by Naomi Novik. I've read the first book in the series but never had the chance to continue, and I would really, really like to. I remember enjoying Temeraire, but I do need to reread that first one before I continue on with the series. We also have Unwind by Neil Shusterman. I loved the Scythe trilogy. I know it has some mixed reviews for the completion, but I enjoyed it overall. I think it's such a great entry back into reading in general because it's so fascinating, but he takes some of these topics that have usually more dense stories behind them, or the writing itself is a little bit denser, and he explores, I think, a lot of these things in a way where younger readers can also enjoy it, while not watering down a lot of the concepts. So if you don't know, Scythe follows it. You know what? I'll just link my Scythe trilogy review below, because we're not even talking about Scythe. We're talking about the Unwind series, which is the one that I might pick up. I really liked Scythe. I'm hoping to read Unwind. The idea is that, because it's dystopian, and dystopian books always have really interesting ideas, that up until a certain age, you can be unwound, which basically means killed, and then your body parts used as donor organs for other people, and you're technically still alive because those parts are still in existence. And so we're seeing characters who they are facing potentially the consequences of being unwound, and they don't want to be unwound. They would like to keep on living. So I'm hoping that I can get around to this one soon. We also have Young Elites. I actually don't know basically anything about Young Elites except for that it's by Marie Lu, and I've enjoyed everything else by Marie Lu that I've picked up. Oh man, all of these. I want to read all of these so bad, which is a good thing. I'm hoping that I can just devour a bunch of books in March. It's my birthday in March, and also, like I said, I'm going out of town, and I'm hoping that I can just sit among beautiful trees and read some books. But we have Daughter Smoke and Bone. I would like to also reread this first book and then eventually continue on with the series, because I read the first one a long time ago. It's by Laini Taylor, And I would like to finish this trilogy eventually. So I gotta reread this first one because I do not remember enough of it. We also have Merciful Crow. This is by the same author who wrote Little Thieves, which I really liked. I was really surprised by. It's a Goose Girl retelling with the main character being the antagonist in that original fairy tale. So I would like to read something else by them, and this is a completed duology. I actually picked up the second one so that as soon as I'm done with the first, hopefully I can jump into the second. And then we have a book that I've joked about this before, none of my friends like this book, and that would be Caraval. I read Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I thought it was so charming and silly and fun and cute, and I had such a good time with it. And until the next one comes out, I have the Caraval trilogy to check out, and I don't know if I'm gonna like it. Like I said, none of my friends like it at all. Next sort of theme for some other books I'm hoping to get around to would be some collabs. So there's one that I for sure will be picking up in March, and then some other ones that might get pushed a little bit more to April. So the one that is for sure would be a nonfiction, and that would be Hood Feminism. So this is a book that is actually very critical of feminism because of the fact that often some very essential things that are needed are not what end up getting discussed. The things that this book is really highlighting as being important would be things like food security, access to quality education, safe neighborhoods, living wage, medical care, all those sorts of things. So it's kind of highlighting that we maybe need to refocus our attention to meet these basic needs. I will be buddy reading this with Jess Owens, and I think we're actually going to do something over on her channel. She has her own little nonfiction book club where she often does collaborative videos after having read the book, so we're hoping to discuss it there. I also may pick up the book Liar's Knot. This is the sequel to Mask of Mirrors. So this is another one where the first book in the series and the second book came out in the same year. I really enjoyed Mask of Mirrors when I read it last year, and I would like to get into the sequel before waiting too long. My friend Joanna, though, was hoping to buddy read this one, and the audiobook comes out near the end of March. So I'm hoping that I can either pick it up here at the end of March or maybe the very beginning of April. Anyway, switching now into the remaining books on my TBR. So I made a video at the beginning of the year, 22 books to read in 2022. And a lot of people who have made this style video are talking about the top 22 books they want to read. The way I set it up was 22 books that were maybe a little bit outside my usual reading. My usual reading being fantasy with the sword and sorcery type of settings. So I wanted to find fantasy that was a little bit different, other genres, or just some nonfiction. And Hood Feminism was on that, which is why Jess had asked. She already knew I was interested in it. But I'm wanting to maybe pick up another nonfiction in March, and I'm not sure which one. You can let me know if you think there's one I should read over the other. If I have time, I would love to read both. But we have The Girl with Seven Names, which details this woman escaping from North Korea, as it says on the cover. And then we have Why We Sleep. And I meant to read this one last year and didn't. And I've heard fantastic things about this one. A lot of my friends picked it up. And it's one of those books where the information, I'm afraid, is going to be really not great as far as... I'm much better about my sleeping now, but part of me is a little nervous to see some of those statistics about what happens when you don't get enough sleep. Anyway, I would like to read both of these. That's it for my March TBR. Let me know what books you're hoping to pick up in the month of March. I will have purchase links down below for all of the books. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.